Greetings and salutations, everybody. This is Monster Zero, and I'm back again tonight with another headphone-related review. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the Cayin IHA-6, which is a solid-state amplifier. Before we get into this review, let's take a look at the front and the back. On the front left, you're going to notice you got your power button. And then directly to the right, you've got three other buttons. The top one is for your source, which would be either balanced or unbalanced. The middle button is for current. You have a high and a low. Now, I use this in high across the board. I don't know necessarily that you need to do that, but to my ears, that's how it sounded the best. And then in the bottom button, it is your gain, high and low, and the high gives you, I believe, a plus 12 dB. Then on to the three jacks. Far left, you have headphone low impedance, which can be used as single-ended or 3-pin XLR, and that is a 10 ohm output. The middle is your high ohm output impedance, again single-ended or 3-pin XLR, and that is 120 ohms, which is quite unusual for a solid state. And then on the far right, you have a 4-pin XLR only, and that's balanced, and that is an output of 0.3 ohms. And then you've got your attenuator. Around back, it's pretty basic. You've got single-ended input. You have balanced input. And then where your power cable goes. And for everybody who was asking where my pup is, there he is. Going back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, I've had nothing in my headphone collection but high impedance headphones with the various ZMFs, the Auteur, the Auteur Classic, the Verite Open, the Verite Closed, the Atrium, and even before all of that, I had the Atticus. All of those worked brilliantly on the OTL amps that I have owned in the past, like the La Figaro 339, the Wu Audio WA2, the Glen OTL, and currently I have Lord Gwen's AirMid. So when ZMF announced that they were coming out with the Caldera, however, I was suddenly going, well, what the hell am I going to use for an amplifier? Enter the Cayin IHA-6. You will notice that this is not a particularly large amplifier. It's actually quite compact. It's about a third the size of my OTL. It has gobs and gobs and gobs of power. So much power. It puts out 7 watts into 32 ohms in balanced and 2.2 watts into 32 ohms in single-ended. This thing drives everything that I've thrown at it. And I'll get into the headphones that I've used in a bit. As far as the sound of the Cayin IHA-6, I would call this a pretty balanced amplifier. It's not too bright, it's not too warm. I would kind of call it straight down the middle. It isn't sterile, it isn't cold, it's actually quite musical and punchy. As far as the headphones that I used to try out this amplifier, I tried all of my ZMFs. The Caldera has an exceptional synergy with this amplifier. It sounds, in fact, I actually prefer the Caldera out of this amp more so than I did the Aegis. Now, don't get carried away. The Aegis is clearly a better sounding amp, but the Aegis sounds similar to my Air Mid, and I prefer my headphones to sound different from one another as opposed to mostly similar. And I really enjoyed the way the Caldera sounds out of the IHA-6. For the Caldera, you're going to want to use this input right here, which is the balanced 0.3 ohm output. For ZMF Dynamics, oddly enough, it sounds better not in the middle, which is the high impedance output, but it actually sounds better out of the low impedance output. I know, counterintuitive, but it just sounds better to me out that way. Of the ZMF Dynamics that I really enjoyed out of this amplifier, I would put the Atrium at the top of the list. The VC was very punchy. It kicked really hard. The VO, very good. Now, this amplifier is not going to make me want to sell my tube amps for ZMFs, but again, if you're in the same boat that I'm in, where you have an OTL for your high impedance headphones and you're planning on buying a Caldera and you don't have an amplifier to drive the Caldera, you need to give this amplifier a serious consideration. It has, like I said, gobs of power. It can drive the Susvara and drive it very well. Plenty of bass, plenty of staging. I would call the staging about average. I wouldn't say it's ginormous, and I certainly wouldn't call it small. Another interesting thing I discovered with this amplifier, actually just about an hour and a half ago, I have a pair of old vintage AKG K340 headphones, which they're very unusual. They have an impedance between 400 and almost 800, depending upon where you measure. And as far as I know, they're one of the only headphones in the world, if not the only, that is a hybrid between dynamic drivers and electrostat. It's a very unusual sounding headphone. Very unusual design, but what it is incredibly difficult to drive. It has a sensitivity, I think, of about 87, 88, and like I said, that the impedance is somewhere in the range of 400 to almost 800. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I typically use that headphone for tube testing, because you can pick up a K340 for about $100 on eBay. They're not very expensive, and frankly, they've got a wonky sound signature. They're very bass light, and to my ears, they're not very good. So I use it for testing tubes. I buy some new tubes, I put it into my Air Mid, and I plug in my K340, because if a tube arcs over and blows a driver on my K340, it's not the end of the world. If it does it on a $3,000 headphone, that's a different story. So anyway, I plugged in the K340 into the IHA-6 just to see if it had the balls to drive it. And not only can it drive it, it was probably the best I've ever heard the K340 sound. I mean, the stage on the K340 was the widest I've ever heard. And it actually gave the K340 a bit of a bass response, which I've never heard. It's a very bass light headphone. So I know not too many of you people out there watching this own a K340 or are interested in buying one. I just found it very, very interesting that after all these years, I finally found an amplifier that makes the K340 actually listenable and good. It also drove my sextets very easily, 600 ohms, 91 sensitivity. It didn't break a sweat. The amplifier itself does not get hot to the touch. It actually remains kind of cool. So that isn't an issue. So you can essentially drive any headphone on the planet with this amplifier, and at a very reasonable price. I've seen them anywhere from $6.99 up to, I think, 9 something. Currently, right now, ZMF Headphones has this in their store, and I believe they are offering it at a discount as a bundle with any of their upcoming ZMF November deals that I believe begins tomorrow morning at 10:30. So if you are in the market to pick up the Caldera and you don't have an amplifier that you think is up to the task, this is a killer amp at a very, very reasonable, relatively speaking, price. I mean, I was quite surprised when I saw the price tag of this headphone amp. Before I heard it, I wasn't expecting it to sound as good as it does. To me, it's a friggin' bargain. So yeah, I mean, this is just a very versatile amplifier. It can drive anything from, super easy to drive 32 ohm, 105 sensitivity headphones, all the way up to the Sosvara, the HE-6, the Abyss 1266, you name it. This amplifier can do it, and it brings it in under $1,000. So a couple of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I mentioned this on HeadFi today. Your planar magnetic headphones are going to be in the balanced jack, which is a 0.3 output impedance. This is a 4-pin XLR input only. So if you are picking up the Caldera, I believe it comes with a stock single-ended and a stock XLR. Don't quote me on that. But if you want to pick up an upgraded cable, perhaps the 2K cable or one of the silver cables, make sure you get it terminated for the Caldera in 4-pin XLR for this input right here. Again, for the ZMF Dynamics, you're going to be wanting to use the far right input, which can be either 3-pin XLR or single-ended. And then in the middle, the 120 ohm output, that's where I use my 600 ohm Behemoths. So yeah, I'm going to keep this review relatively short and sweet because I want to get it filmed and then edited and then posted before ZMF November kicks off tomorrow morning. I've had a couple members on HeadFi sending me private messages specifically about this amp, asking me, hey, what do you think? So yeah, I mean, I'm going to give this amplifier a big thumbs up for the Caldera. It's absolutely fantastic with the Caldera. With the ZMF Dynamics, it's very good. It's not going to make you forget about your OTL, but if you don't have an OTL, this amp does nothing wrong. It has a clear, clean, sweet sound to it. It hits hard. It's got a very nice, decent sound stage. Nice sub-bass presence. Very musical. Again, not dry, not sterile, like some other solid-state amps that I've heard. Yeah, this gets Monster Zero's big thumbs up. Anyway, I'll catch you guys next time.